Hello and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture, we're going to be discussing about the backend. What happens on the backend? What is the backend all about? So now we know the backend also means the server side, right? So the backend is also the server side. Server side is also the same thing as backend, right? So what happens on the server side? What happens when we send our data from Philip going to Frank? How does everything work? So when the data from Philip arrives at the backend, we've gotten the data from Philip and the aim is to send it to Frank, right? The aim is to send it to Frank. So what now happens on the backend? So one of the major reasons or one of the major or most important purpose of the backend is what we refer to as the business logic. So business logic. What is the business logic? The business logic is basically everything that happens. Do you understand? For instance, when you make a transfer to a particular person, the fact that they would get a credit alert and you get a debit alert, all of this, all of this is the business logic. Do you understand? So basically, business logic itself is how the application works. Do you understand? So nothing really happens on the front end. What happens on the front end is just um collection of data. On the front end, all that happens is collection of data and basically retrieval of data. So front end is just there to gather data and also to display data. When you type a message on WhatsApp, what you are doing right now is that you are feeding the backend with some data. So when you feed it with the data, it would now return that data to you. Now you are retrieving the data. So the front end or the client side is just there for like data collection and also retrieval of data. But the backend itself is what processes that data. Do you understand? So that is what we call the business logic. The logic itself, the major work. That is when you send a message from Philip to Frank, it is the backend that will now know that, okay, I need the ID of Frank, then process all the data and send the data to Frank. So now Frank will now receive the message. So the business logic is one of the most important things that happen on the backend. So aside business logic, another important stuff that happens on the backend is what we call data storage. So what is data storage? So yeah, when I go on WhatsApp, I can have access to my messages from 2 or 3 months ago or as far as a year ago, right? Depending on if I've been backing up my data. So what happens on the back end, which is one of the most important reasons why the backend exists, is what we call the data storage. So when you go to a bank and you say, oh yeah, I want to create an account, right? When you create an account, or let's stick to WhatsApp now. You've been using WhatsApp, so let's stick to WhatsApp. So when you say, oh yes, I would like to create a WhatsApp account, then you drop your phone number, you submit your phone number, right? And some maybe other informations like your name or your email address or whatever. So when you want to create a WhatsApp account, everything is new. They collect your phone number and your email address. Where do you think this email address goes? This email address goes straight to the backend. So when it reaches the backend saves it into what we call a database. So the database is a storage area, right? It's a storage area. So it looks, people represent it like a cylindrical form like this. So this is our DB, right? So when you send your phone number and your email while trying to create a WhatsApp account, the data goes to the backend through an API, right? We've learned about APIs. So it goes to the backend through an API. Then from the backend, it moves straight to the DB. So this is what we call data storage. So after you've successfully created a WhatsApp account, right? When you create a WhatsApp account and you now want to sign up, sign in, you know, sign in is like, okay, I've created an account, so I want to log in into my account. So the front end collects your data because the front end is going to ask you that, okay, what is your phone number? The front end is going to ask you for your phone number and it's going to ask you for your email, right? It's going to ask for your phone number and your email, right? So when it asks you for your phone number and you enter your phone number and your email, it is going to send that same data again to the backend, right? So when you send that data to the backend will be like, okay, we have this data. Now it would confirm if your information has been stored in the database. If it has been stored in the database, then you gain access to WhatsApp, just like that. So if it checks the database and your information is not there, then you'll be rejected. Will be rejected. So this is how everything works. So you can see the importance of backend now, because it is what really, really saves your data. It is what does all the thinking. It is what checks, oh, is your data existing? Is it not existing? All of those thinking happens. Or when you look closely now, what the front end does is that it gathers that data, sends it to the backend, and it also gets the response from the backend and displays it to the front end. So if you try to log into WhatsApp and you've not registered that number, you say message like, oh, this number is not registered on WhatsApp, so stuff like that. So that message you are receiving, it's a response from the backend itself, from the backend server. So it is not the front end that did all the thinking or all the logic. You understand? Don't forget that the business logic occurs on the backend. Data storage also occurs on the backend. So these are the two major functionality of the backend. So we have a lot of reasons why the backend exists, right? But I'm just focusing on the most important one. The first one is the business logic, which is like the major activities of the business, the thinking and everything. The logical part of the business happens on the backend. Data storage is storing all our information like our name, our email, our phone number, our BVN, our social security number, and all of that. There's one more important function of the backend, so which is authorization and authentication. Actually, I should have written it as authentication and authorization, but everything is fine. So this is another major part of the backend or major functionality of the backend. So what is authorization and what is authentication? So authorization, or let me start with authentication, because the right way I should have written it should have been authentication first before authorization, because authorization depends on authentication. So authentication simply means verification. Do you understand? Uh, Authentication means I've actually explained what it is. When you enter your phone number, your email, and the backend checks if the email and phone number is existing in the database and if it is correct. So that's authentication that I just explained, but I'll just call your attention to it again. So authentication is just verifying that you are who you claim to be. Do you understand? So if you say, oh, I'm Philip and my phone number is 090, stuff like that, and my email is this. So the backend is responsible for verifying that thing, because the backend has access to the database and it can simply check if what you're saying is true. So if you are once you are authenticated, now we know that okay, you are who you claim to be, right? You are Philip. So now we know Philip is a real person. Philip is not a fake, right? Philip exists. So now that we know Philip exists, we now talk about authorization. What is authorization? Authorization now has to do with what can Philip do and what can Philip not do. So that's why when you are in some group, you will not be able to send message because you are not an admin and so many other things. Authorization, authentication, backend, business logic, database, all of this will be studied thoroughly in Python full stack mastery course. So stay tuned, and in the next few lectures, we are going to discuss all of this and we are going to see how this works in the real world. And we are going to build a lot of real world applications that we are going to be implementing all of this. All right, that's all for this lecture. See you in the next lecture. Bye.